Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer, and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. We're continuing our project of 3D modeling a pinball machine. The last episode, we had given our octopus a little star clip for his hair, and we also went ahead and 3D modeled a treasure chest and some details like that. Today we are going to focus on more of the interior of the pinball machine and adding in those elements. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D and get started. So here is where we left off from the last episode. We gave our octopus a star-shaped hair clip, and we also made this little cute treasure chest over here. So I want to add in some more of the interior details in here. We're eventually going to move around these objects and just clean things up a little bit. So for right now, I'm just going to get this organized. I'm going to move the treasure chest off to the side. I'm going to name this So I'm going to group these together. As this gets more detailed, it's really important to keep it nice and neat. We decide we're not moving forward with the sphere, so I can go ahead and delete it. I'm going to move the bumpers and the castle out of here, just temporarily. So we have a nice clean area in here. Now we're going to need to adjust this a little bit. You can take a look at my sketch that I had. I want to make this top area more curved so that the pinball, when it's launched, if someone launches it really far, kind of goes along that curve, or it'll curve back down as it moves. I'd also like to add in this area here and these. So let's go ahead and work on that a little bit more. I want to take a closer look at this pinball machine body. So I'm going to turn off the volume builder and volume mesher, and you'll see everything looks a little bit more mesh-like, including our octopus. And I'm going to turn on our garage shading lines for now, just so that I can see the interior, because we're going to need to 3D model in here and create those looks. I'm going to put this on my other screen so that I can reference it. So there's a few different ways we can go about creating a curved surface in here. I'm going to turn off the bevel for right now. We can create these shapes using the volume mesher, but it's also nice to start off with this existing geometry. So what that I may end up doing is I'm just going to select the floor in here. You can also do this using UN, and I'll just select all the polygons with the same normal. And once I do that, I can hit copy, click away from that, and then use Control V, Command V to paste it. And you'll see that we have this new object here. And if I solo it, you'll see that we just have this. And we even carried over the bevel, which is fine. It's not a big deal. But now based on this, what we can do is think of how far we'd like to extrude this. So I'll use MT, and I want to make sure to create caps on the other side. So you can see as I extrude this, if I turn on create caps, it closes that side, which is important. I'll unsolo that again. And we're basically building up this area in here. I want it to go up to the top, and then we may need to move down some of these points a little bit. And I don't really feel like I need this loop here, so I'll use UL, select that loop, use UN to dissolve it. I'll do the same thing for this loop, MN to dissolve it. And that's what we're left off with. Now, we do want to put this inside of the volume builder again, because this is going to be, we're going to be using the SDF so that we can use the Boolean functions in here. So I'm going to turn back on the volume builder. And, oh, I put that in the wrong volume builder. Did I? Let me find my model again. Lower pinball machine in the volume builder. I accidentally moved the Mo instance button in there. I don't need the button in there. Okay. So let me try that again. Moving the right things into here is helpful. So I kind of want to work on these separately. And I'm going to rename this machine interior so we can differentiate. And you'll see all of these objects are within my manager. Now this is getting a little complicated in here. So what I might want to do is start putting things into folders, and we talked about folders. So I created a folder here. I'm just going to put the pinball main body forms in this folder. All right, and then we need another folder. Accidentally added it within that folder, so I'll pull it out and I'll name this pinball main body. And this folder, this new folder is going to be for pinball machine interior. Then I can add this in here. And I'm going to need to do a little bit more from here. So just to help me see what I'm doing, I'm going to grab this part again. I actually want 2 of these. I know this is a lot. And I'm going to hide one of them. I'm actually going to get rid of the bevel in here because that's just not necessary. And for this shape, I don't really need these either. So I'm just going to use UL for loop selection, hold down Shift, and click on all of these. Use MN for dissolve, get rid of them. Now they're gone, life is simpler, and we need to bevel these edges. So I'm going to select each one of these edges here. And you'll see in a little bit what I'm trying to do. And it'll start to make a little bit more sense. And then I'll use MS to bevel them. And remember, things don't look as smooth while you are volume building them out of voxel. So we probably want more subdivisions on these bevels so that they look nice once we put them into cubes or voxels. I'm going to unhide that, and we're going to look back inside of our volume builder. Right now, we want this to be renamed as subtract. And that's because then we'll know this is the thing we are subtracting. So I changed the blending mode to subtract, and when I turn back on the volume builder, and the voxel mesher, you can see that it's there and it's subtracted, and we have that round area a little bit better in there. And now we're going to need to show the area where the pinball gets pushed up. So that's going to require us to make a little aisle here. And it'd be nice to line it up with this exact cube area. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off again just for a moment. And I want to look at just maybe it'd be easier to add in another cube and add it on after that subtraction part of the process. So it's a little bit of thinking about, what do we want to add first? What do we want to subtract first? So I'm going to add in a cube in here. I'm going to adjust its size. To about that. I'm just going to move this over. And I actually want this to be angled. Close to the angle of the machine. I'm going to make this exactly 6.5, negative 6.5 degrees, because if you remember, that's what that slope is there that we had made, so it'll just make it closer. Even though we don't need to be super exact right now, it'll just make my life easier, and why not? Adjusting its length. Now we're going to need this to go in our volume. And we need this to go in here as an add, so union. And it's not large enough to be showing up, so I need to make it larger. It's a little bit too much. That'll get our job done. You can even adjust the shape in here a little bit. I may adjust this shape here. So I'm going to unhide those. And I only want to affect this area. And I want to move that in a little bit like that and move it over. Just making sure that I have the correct polygon selected again. It's a little bit of a process going back and forth and visualizing what it looks like in the end and then adjusting it further. So we still want to subtract more of this, and that's okay, more of it on that side. So we still have this polygon in here, so we can use MT to extrude it. We want to turn off create cap so that we aren't creating additional caps. And I want to click on that. I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this and then move it down. Okay, so now that whole thing is going to subtract. And you can see that looks better. Now it looks like the ball could go up and around. So I'd like to start adding in some more of the details in here. In the edit menu, I have under preferences, all of these options in here. If you go down to scheme colors, viewport, you'll see that you have your spline start and spline end. We're going to be working more with splines at this point, so you may find it helpful to adjust these to be vibrant colors. I have pink and green just so that I can see it on my screen. It makes it easier. Really highly saturated colors. So that's what we're working with right now. Right now I'm in viewport solo. I'm going to turn that off. So now I can see more details popping up in my screen. And I really want to start thinking about the layout in here and adding in those details, as you can see in my sketch. So we have these ramps, we have the castle, we have the bumpers here, the treasure chest, all that fun stuff. So let's just start roughly laying it out. We can move things around if needed. I'm going to grab this treasure chest over here. I'm going to move it in and down, something like that for right now. And then we have our bumpers. I'm going to put all of these into a null. So Alt-G with them selected will make a group, and I'll name this group bumper group. And then that way I can just move them all together, which makes it a little bit easier because I will be sliding these up and down the pinball machine. We can adjust in the coordinates for this to be -6.5 because that's the angle in which this is going in terms of the ramp so that the ball rolls down. I'm going to lower these using this top arrow. You'll see that I have my coordinate system enabled with W, so that as I move these down, I'm moving them down vertically. Alrighty, there we go. So that's roughly in place. We may need to move these around a little bit more, and that's no biggie to do that. Maybe I'll move this up a little bit, this in. Something kind of like that. Move these off further to the side. Okay, so we have those 3 bumpers, and then we're going to need our castle. And you'll see that our geometry axis isn't usually used with the volume builder, so it seems to be running into some kind of glitch. But if I turn this on and off, all the geometry axes, we can see our parts again. So that's just like a glitchy thing. It wasn't totally updating because there were just so many calculations, I think, happening with that at once. So I'm just gonna move this guy over by its null. Move it up. And I want to rotate it. So I think at this point in the video, we've done quite a lot. And if you haven't already, take a little bit of a break, get a cup of tea, maybe get yourself a snack. That's totally okay to do. I mean, I clearly took a break. I'm wearing a whole new outfit. It's a whole new day. And I think that's actually an important part of the design process, to step away from a project and come back to it with fresh eyes. My aunt actually has this phrase where she says, I'm going to go marinate. And that means she's going to go have some quiet time or go meditate, take a break, go relax. And I think that's actually a really important part of the design process as well. I think we all need a moment to go marinate and come back to a project with fresh eyes. So go ahead and take a break if you'd like. You can pause this. That's the great thing about YouTube. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into 3D modeling again, and you can press play whenever you're ready. So here is where we left off, and I'm just beginning to think of what else to add in here. We can always go back and reference our mood boards and sketches to give us some ideas of where to go. We're definitely going to need this part in here, the flippers. You can see that there's 2 levels of flippers. We have some ramps in here we can add in. And keep in mind that nothing needs to look exactly like our sketch. We just put this here as a reference for the meantime. But it's okay if we make changes along the way. So let's first start thinking about adding in that portion down here that allows you to, I don't know what that portion is called. This portion here, whatever that is called, I want to 3D model it. Alrighty. So I think a helpful thing to do for that is to use the spline pen. And it's helpful to have the spline pen snap to the surface. So we can have this snap. We can turn on our snap and we can look at our snap settings. We definitely want to snap to the surface. So we can choose polygons, that works. We could snap to certain points or something like that. I think polygons is a good way to go. And now that we have all of that in order, that's looking pretty good. And the interesting thing about this portion down here is you can see that it's mainly symmetrical. So we can work with that. I'm going to look at this from above here. And I'm just going to start drawing here. So I'll put in a point here, click and drag. I have an entire episode that goes into greater depth on the pen tool, the spline pen tool, right up here. So if you want to learn all the hotkeys for this and get really familiar with it, you can check that out. Or if you just want to dive into it and be adventurous, you can start here with me. And you can always go back to make changes later or reference that video. So there we go. We have our basic spline put in. Now I would like to extrude this spline, so we can definitely do that. It looks like I accidentally created 2 splines. I only need this first one here. So in order to extrude this, I'm going to hold Alt and go into our extrude, and I'm just going to rotate around so we can see which way is this extruding. It looks like we are extruding in the wrong direction, so we want to change our direction from auto to Y, and I find that usually fixes it. Now we're going in the Y direction. Very handy, and we have this way too tall. Let's try 1 inch for right now. So I can see that since I've closed and reopened up Cinema 4D, now we're working in centimeters. I don't remember if I started off this project in centimeters, but that's okay. I can always switch that later if I want to. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the thicken. And you can see that's thickening this way too much. Let's try. I'm still thinking in inches, 0.25 inches. It's okay. We'll figure it out. So that's a basic shape there. I think that's a little bit different than the typical pinball machine shape, but I actually don't really mind it too much. We can also go back and adjust the individual points of our spline if we turn off the extrude and the thicken, and that's the really nice thing about it. Now I do want to give a quick tip for if you're having trouble seeing your spline. Remember, in your preferences, you can go into your scheme colors for your viewport, and you can adjust your spline start and spline end to be any color you'd like, and that makes it a little bit easier to see. If you're still having trouble seeing them, you can solo them, and that can help you grab points and move them around a little bit more easily. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of that. You can see them still snapping to the surface, which is useful. And I'm looking at my mood board. I think this works for the most part here. We can use our own creativity and change things a little bit from other pinball machines, and that's okay. So now we have this form here, and we can voxelize it a little bit later if we'd like to. Can even make this a little bit taller. And we need to mirror this onto the other side, so I can click on the thicken. I can go ahead and grab in a symmetry, and I'll need to make sure that this is mirroring around the Z direction. So there we go. And you can see that this isn't perfectly centered, especially if we look at it from the top view. Turn on our lines. You can see this isn't perfectly centered. So what we do in that situation is we use our enable axis. So you can also use the L hotkey for that, and we just move the axis more to where it looks centered. You can even count the little blocks here on the side to try to get it centered. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It doesn't need to be perfect for this situation. This is a very stylized pinball machine, but there we go. That's good enough for me anyways. And now we're going to need a couple flippers for the inside there. But I want to remember to name these, so this will be symmetry, and I'll just name this barrier 1. So that's pretty good. And with that put together, let's drop in a cube into our scene. And this cube, I'm going to actually solo it in a little bit. I want to adjust its size. I'm used to working in inches, so I'm just going to change that to inches. And in my preferences, I can go into units and change this to be inches. And remember, you can really work in any units you'd like to. I just found this easier. So I'm going to make this 0.5 for right now, and I'm going to make in the Y direction, let's do 0.5 again. I can adjust this all in a little bit. I am guessing dimensions for right now, since I don't have all the measurements of every little piece for inside of a pinball machine. But I just wanted to bring this in here. I'm going to adjust that to be 0.25 in there. The thicken, and then for the cube, that is 0.5. But now we can line this up here, and we can get an idea from comparing it to the other things in the machine what scale we want. So perhaps something like this a little bit. That could work. And I'm just eyeballing this here for right now. And we can also reference our mood boards again. So we have a flipper in here. It's not really too much taller than the ball, so this isn't a very tall object. But I do want it to be a little bit taller than this. And I'm going to go ahead and solo it and make this editable and name this flipper. So I'm going to grab in these two, hit T, scale them in just a little bit. First, I need to turn off our enable axis so that we are not scaling the axis and we're scaling the actual object. And then I want to just make this part here a little bit wider, just ever so slightly, not anything too dramatic. Like that. We've got a flipper. And this part should be quite a bit rounded, so we can use the hotkey MS for the bevel, and we can just bevel that out, make it look nice. Even scale this in further. And then these two need to be scaled out here as well, so I'll grab those two edges. I need to bevel these, use the hotkey MS for the bevel, and we're going to bevel these. So that's looking a little bit more like that. Now, if we look at our reference again, you'll see that this has that rubber wrapped around it, like a rubber band. And actually, when you watch that in slow motion, they were showing that it actually moves because these flippers move so fast that the rubber actually kind of moves around it and ripples off of it, which is pretty cool. And you'll notice that as I zoom in, it's starting to clip, so I can use Control D to go into my display and change the clipping from large to medium or even small. It was on large, so it's very possible that actually the last thing I was 3D modeling was a building, so that makes sense. But I'm going to go ahead and put these guys in here. Use UL to now select those. MT to extrude them out. I have create caps off. And now we have some rubber band going around there. Now, if we look at this flipper here, this one looks a little bit different than maybe on the retro machine. Sometimes you see that part. Well, let's go Google flippers actually. Pinball machine flipper. Images. Oh. So some of them you can see the pin going all the way through, but on the one in that reference image, we don't really see that. So I guess it's optional. Not all machines show that. You can do what you like. So anyways, I'm going to just go ahead and leave this pretty much as it is. And I'm going to need more than one of these flippers. So I'm actually going to go into model mode and I'm going to make a copy of this. And I'm going to move that one around later. But this one, this first one that's lower, I'm going to name this flipper lower and put that within the symmetry as well with the thicken. And now you can see we have two flippers. And I want to leave just enough space in the center for a ball to accidentally go through and then you lose your points. It's got to be a little bit challenging, right? Alrighty, so that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's way too tall. Okay, That feels better to me. We can always adjust things more, and I probably will, knowing myself. Because it's hard to get a feel for everything all at once. I don't really like how this is curved at the bottom, so I just want to click on the spline here and rotate it a little bit. Like, I don't like that curvature there. Or I may even need to adjust this one up here. That feels like a nicer shape to me. I'll turn back on the extrude, and now we have everything back where it was. I'm going to hit save, so we're good to go. And we need to think about what we want to do next. So that was a really good initial step. Next up are our ramps. So we're going to build out some splines, and I'll go into this view here and the top view so that I can see what's happening. May rotate this around a little bit. You can see here that my octopus is a little bit in the way, but no worries with that. What we'll need to do is just, honestly, I can go ahead and hide them inside of the volume builder. So I'm going to turn off all of those. So now I'm hiding the star that was on the octopus. I'm going to name this star. And then we have this guy here. If you hit the S hotkey, it takes you to the object you have selected. So in our volume builder, I can go ahead and turn off the upper pinball body. I can turn off the octopus, and now you can see that we're left with this mesh version of them, and then it's much easier to just go ahead and hide these. We can turn them back on later. You'll see that they're still included in here in our hierarchy, so we can check these on later, and I'll also hide the eyes of our octopus so that we can really just focus in on the ramps here. So this part is a little bit tricky. I like to snap to the polygon so that we're snapping to this top surface here. It can be a little bit difficult to see your splines in this phase, so I also sometimes click on and off this viewport solo. We're going to be using the spline pen. I have an entire episode going through all the hotkeys for the spline pen and all the tools for it, so if you ever feel like you need to reference something for the spline pen, I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. But for right now, we're going to need to add in some ramps. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the spline pen. I have my polygon selected as a snap. And then I can just begin to draw here. And think about where I actually want this ramp to go. So I want one ramp to start out here. And you can see that I am drawing that. It's just hard to see because of the geometry here. So that's why it's really helpful to be able to turn that on and off. And we don't need to worry too much about getting everything exact in here at this very moment. Because this is something that can be adjusted more later. Like I can click on this point, I can rotate it a little bit like that. I can scale it using T, so same buttons work here. I can click on this point, scale it up a little bit like that if I'd like to, just have things nice and smooth. It's good to start off with a pretty nice spline to begin with. Very few points along here. I like to use the uniform spline and bump up those subdivisions. So now we have a really nice subdivide spline here. And I'm going to start doing the next one. So when I click on the spline pen and I just start drawing again, it says create new splines. This is checked on. So when I start drawing, it'll just automatically begin creating a new spline. So I would like a spline that goes through this castle here. Now I'm going to go double check my work again by soloing. It's really important to get these endpoints angled nicely in here. It'll just make your life easier later on. So there we go, we've got that in there. And if we're feeling fancy, we can add in one more spline. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll click off to the side and start a new spline. And this one I'll make a little bit lower, maybe right here. And I want it to kind of travel over and get us into the bumpers here so that we have another way to score some extra points. If you go along this ramp, you get to go into the bumpers, which is a good time. Okay, so now we have 3 ramp outlines here for the most part. And I'm going to look at it from the side view now. My hope is that these had snapped to the surface. It doesn't look like they had, but that's not a big deal because these are really easy to move up. So I can select all of our splines here. I can change our display mode to lines. Sometimes you don't snap exactly to where you thought you were going to, and it's okay. Now I'm going to angle all of these at -6.5 because in that case then we know for sure that this is lining up with the angle of the actual game. Now we're going to need a profile, and I'd like to make this profile using a rectangle. So we've dropped a rectangle into our scene. I'm going to change the direction of it to ZY. And actually what I find helpful sometimes is just to see what it looks like if I were to sweep this, but first I'm going to make it smaller. Let's try making this 1 inch width and 0.25 tall. And I mean, we're going to adjust this further. It's just a starting point for our profile. One of the trickiest things is getting your axes lined up nicely when you drop in your sweep, because that affects things quite a bit. So I'm going to look at these splines here and I want to see where their axis is. So these axes are all pretty much in the center. I'm going to solo the spline here. I want to line up this with the start of the spline. So let's take a look at this guy here. If I turn on my points, you can see the start and the end of the spline. So if you ever forget which was the start of your spline and which was the end of your spline, you can look at your preferences again and see what color it is. You can see my spline start is pink. So I probably want my profile to line up with that. And I also want my axis to line up with that. So if I go back in here, turn on my enable axis, I need to go ahead and find my axis. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Now we can see it. Now we got something going. I just want to snap this to my spline. So in my snaps, I'm going to turn on spline as a snap. And points. We want to snap to splines and points. So now I have my axis enabled. We're going to move this here, snap it. We're going to check it in each of our views that is snapped to the start of the spline. I just feel like that makes things nice and neat. And then we can name this spline dot left, because that's the left side. And our rectangle, I want to be our profile, and I'm going to reset transform, and that should take it to the beginning of that spline. So now we have our axes lined up with the beginning, the start of the spline. So then now the next tricky part is we want to have our spline selected. We want to go into our generators here, and we want to grab our sweep. And I have a whole tutorial on the sweep that you can check out if you're interested in. Now, something important to keep in mind that when you add in your sweep, you need your profile on top of your spline. Oh, whoops, I accidentally put my flipper there. We need our profile. Try to grab the right things from your object manager. Don't do what I do. Okay, so now we have a rectangle on top. And you can see that things look a little bit funny here. Not exactly what we intended, but that's okay. What we can do is we can try adjusting our plane of the rectangle. Oh, you can see it looks so much better with the XY plane. I like to use the rectangle as a starting point because it's a nice way to check that your axes are going the right way and not having to rotate them later. Everything's nice and neat and lined up, and then we can make this more detailed later. So now that things look nice and neat and lined up, our ramp looks nice, these curves look nice, we're going to adjust this further. Because you can see that this is nice and neat, but it's kind of boring because it's flat. So we need to add some interesting stuff to this. So I'm going to select point mode. I'm going to turn off enable axis. I have my spline selected. We're going to start grabbing some points along the spline. So you can see we have that point grabbed, that point grabbed. If it helps you see your points, you can solo it at times. I like to do that myself. We're just going to grab all of that and solo. If we find it helpful to see our sweep, we can turn that back on, and I can just move these up. I'll probably turn off my snap for right now so I'm not just snapping to things like crazy. And that looks okay. I want it to raise up a little bit more in the back here, so I'm going to grab the green arrow and move just these points up a little bit. You can see how neat our spline is, which is very nice to see. I'd say that the splines and the ramps are probably the trickiest part of this project. When I was a student mentor and I used to teach at School of Motion, I remembered students always had the most trouble with splines, and I don't blame them for that. It's hard. When I was a student, splines were hard. They were hard in every 3D software that I've worked in, whether if it was SolidWorks, 3ds Max, or now Cinema 4D. Splines are complicated. Okay, so we got our rectangle here. You can see that we probably want a larger ramp, so I'm going to adjust the width here. This gives us some flexibility. And you'll notice that this is getting a little bit warped now, and maybe that's not the most flattering thing for our ramp. We want it to be a little bit straighter. So in our sweep, we can have the 2-rail system on. And the 2-rail system allows you to use a secondary rail to control the direction of this, kind of the angle in which this is going the entire time. So you can grab your spline in object mode, use the E hotkey, hold Control to move this while making a duplicate, and just drag it out. So there we go. We have a twisted spline now, but you can see it's not banking weird directions anymore. So we have made an improvement. It's a little bit better than it was previously. So what do we do? Well, I like to see what's going on. So I'm going to click on both my regular spline and my rail spline and solo these and turn off the sweep. So you can see that these are crisscrossing here, and that's why it's crisscrossing if we turn this on. So if we click on one of these, we can see one at a time. And I can go into point mode and realize these points need to move over. Okay, so that's a little bit better. But we still have an issue here. I want to grab this handle and drag it. Notice that I clicked on my spline pen to do this. I'm dragging this angle. I'm going to click on this point here. First with the selection brush so that I'm not accidentally creating new points, and then I'm going to go into the spline pen with that selected. I'm going to click on that arrow here. I'm going to drag it out, try to keep it smooth. Look at this from different angles. Really important that this is smooth and not looking too crazy. We can rotate these if needed. And we're just going to see what this looks like with the spline on. So this isn't too bad. It's looking a little bit smoother. That's good. Good, good, good. No more twists. I'm actually pretty happy with this. Things rarely go this smoothly with a spline. Okay, so I'm going to unsolo that, and we're going to take a look at it from this view. We're going around the treasure chest, going around these guys here. This is looking okay. And the one thing is that this needs some guardrails to keep the ball on. So I'm going to click on my rectangle. I'm going to make a duplicate of it to save it for later. And then I'm going to edit this one. So I hit the C hotkey to make it editable. I'm going to solo it. I need to turn off the sweep so that I can see my rectangle. So right now, I'm going to want to make some adjustments to the spline. So I'm going to go into model mode. I'm going to click on spline pen. I'm going to click on this and hit delete edge. And I'm going to see how that's looking now. We're going back and forth and testing things out. So you could see that actually this is flipped. And it's upside down now. So I might undo what I had just done. And instead of deleting this top edge, I'm going to delete the bottom. Okay, so now that's looking nice. Just want to grab these points here. Bring them down to make that edge a little bit more pronounced. And we have a very nice swept rail. I'm going to hit save in case if a catastrophe happens and this crashes or something. Now you'll notice that this is not thickened, so we'll need to click on our sweep and hold Alt while adding in a thicken. And that is way too much. Let's try 0.2 for our thickness and see how that is making us feel. It's making me feel rather happy. So I'm gonna take this as a win here and make some more ramps and probably speed that up for all of you to make it a little bit easier for you. And let's go ahead and do that. So as you can see here, I've got my ramps pretty much put in, and this is all good. I'm thinking that what I might want to do is actually make this ramp editable. So this one right here, you'll see this one is our ramp L, and now I'm going to change this name to ramp L construction because I want to do something else with this. So I'm going to right click on this and say current state to object, and you'll see we got a copy. And now we can turn off this other one here and just focus in on this one. What I want to do is make a hole for the ball to fall through, so we need to 3D model this and give this a little bit of a ledge here, so I'm deleting those polygons. And now what I need to do is select this here and this here, use MB for bridge. Once I have these both selected, which it looks like I don't, both edges selected that I want to bridge together. MB for bridge is the hotkey. I have a whole episode on the bridge tool. If you want to check it out, you can. If you just want to follow along with me and be adventurous, you can do that as well. All good either way. I'm going to select another couple edges. I'm having trouble selecting them, so I'm using the right bracket to make my selection brush slightly larger here. Got both of those selected, use MB. Let's bridge them. And it looks like I don't have everything selected correctly. Let's try that again, MB after hitting undo. And there we go. Very nice and beautiful. Now we can use MD to fill in the hole here. And there we go. Much, much, much better. Now we need a hole for this to fall through. And I don't know if that hole really needs to be circular. I've seen it be circular in other machines, but we are doing our own thing here. So I'm interested in clicking these right here. And I'm going to delete them. I'm interested in clicking these right here, and I'm interested in deleting them as well. Now we have a hole for the marble or pinball or whatever you'd like to call it to fall through. The one thing that I'm not liking about this, though, is you'll see that this goes out further than the polygons underneath. So I'm actually going to hit undo on that, use ML to add in a loop. I'm just going to add in a loop there, add in a loop here. So that's ML to add in a loop. Now I can select these, and we'll have a much cleaner hole once we delete this. Now we just need to use UL, edge mode, and see if we can select this hole in here. We can. Let's try to see if we can select this hole. And then we'll use MP for stitch and sew. We have another episode on this tool. You can just search for it by its name. I need to hold shift. Sometimes I forget which hotkeys do what. I need to hold shift while using that tool there. And now we have a very nice hole for the ball to drop down into, and then it'll roll down here to the flippers, and then we can hit it again with the flippers. And that was the ultimate goal of that. But we still have our construction geometry here for if we want to make changes. So that is also good. I'm going to hit save before any unknown catastrophes happen and we crash. So there we go. We got something going here. We've got ramps. I think that we can make this a little bit more exciting with some other things in here. So let's look at our mood boards as a reference. So we have these with the kickers that actually kick the marble back out again. We have some extra flippers up here that we could add in. We have the treasure chest here. It looks like I added in coins here. I'm not sure if that's necessary for me to add that in as well. But we have a whole lot of options of what we could add in. So I think I'm going to duplicate this treasure chest over here. I'm going to hold the C hotkey and move this over. Scale it down using T. And I can see we also have a small little treasure chest over here, and I want it to look like it's sunken in the sand a little bit, so I'm going to drop this guy down and push it over here. It can kind of be under the ramp. I'm going to turn off my snap so that this doesn't go all over the place. And this could be, this could act as another thing you can hit to get points in the game, which could be fun. If we wanted to, we could also 3D model some coins in there. As I look at my mood board, there's other kinds of targets you can hit. Maybe you get points to go through the castle, so I could add in a little target there. by the ramp. So to make it a little bit easier for myself, I'm going to click on this ramp. I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to click that button there, and then we have a cube. I'm going to make it small so I could see it better. Oh, I thought this would end up in the center of the ramp, but it didn't. That's okay. I can move it over, move it up. And now we can angle this like just so. Now remember, this is going to become voxelized, so there's really no point in adding in a bunch of small details that wouldn't really show up unless you had the... Well, there's no point in adding them if they aren't going to show up as little cubes easily once we voxelize them. Even these ramps are going to become voxelized, so I'm going to actually, speaking of which, move this down just a little bit, holding Alt to move it down in smaller increments. And I want this cube here to be a target, so I'm going to lower this down. It's something you hit, and there's going to be a sensor off to the side here that it's attached to, that I'm just going to leave as another cube because this is all going to become voxelized anyways. So there's no point in adding really a whole lot of in-depth detail, but I'll add these on both sides. Something like that. And let's add in some other flippers. So we made this copy of the flipper down here so that we could add it to other places. So let's go ahead and see what that could look like. I'm gonna move this up. Now, something we may find fun is to have the flipper here. I feel like these bumpers are kind of big. I might shrink them down to a size that feels a little bit more proportional. Okay, that feels a little bit more accurate to me of what the bumper size would be. Going to move these up. And we could have this in here to help hit things back into the bumper, so I'm going to lower this down. And I'm going to hold Shift and click on the cube so that we add a cube exactly where that flipper is so that it lines up. Or did I hit Alt? I might have hit Alt. And I'm just going to shrink this guy down. That's looking nice. I feel like modeling this cube further, so I'm going to use MT and extrude this out. Because I'm thinking this could be a really fun barrier here. Something for things to bounce off of in a way. Going to grab these points, move them over. Something like that. I'm going to move this flipper down here. I might have it hidden by the treasure chest here. You can have it come out and be used at the right moment. So I think that this is pretty good for our pinball machine here. I'm going to go ahead and turn back on our octopus. Where is our little octopus guy? So I know I hit him. Now I need to find him again. So I'm going to turn on the upper pinball machine, turn on the octopus. I need to turn on his eyes. And his star. Here are his eyes. And there we go. If we want to make this a little bit more detailed, we can add in some text as well. So I like to use the text object here. And we can voxelize this as well. We're going to voxelize everything here. I'm not sure if voxelize is a word, but it sure is now because I've used it enough times. I'll have to look that up. I'm actually really curious. So I want to adjust the height in here and make this shorter. Move this up. Line this guy up here. We want it to be higher up. And say something other than text. I'll type in Sandblast. Now, if you're wondering why I'm naming this game Sandblast, it's kind of a play on words. Like when you're having fun, you say, I'm having a blast. And this game is about finding things in the sand. And then I was also thinking about how Sandblast is a manufacturing method, and I do a lot of stuff for engineers and manufacturing as a freelancer. So I went with Sandblast as the name. Pretty nerdy when you think about the reasoning behind why I named it what it was, but that's what it is. I'm going to adjust the height in here. I want this to be a different typeface. If you have typefaces that aren't showing up for you, like they are for me, something you can do is make sure that if you are using Adobe fonts, you need to open up your Creative Cloud and then restart Cinema 4D. So I'm going to do that so that I get these options in here again. And then I'll meet you all right back here. And I'm going to go ahead and check in here and see if I have more typefaces. And we do. We have Mr. Eves. I feel like I use Mr. Eves all the time on my podcast. So I thought, why not also use it for this guy here? Sandblast. And another cool thing to show you is that you can turn on kerning if you check this box here. And then you get these little controls and you can actually adjust the letters. So we can make this look pretty. So actually it doesn't look horrible. It's a little bit different adjusting the letters in 3D, I feel. So there we go. We got our Sandblast sign in there. I can move this up. I kind of want to adjust the arms a little bit more of the octopus, so I'm going to go ahead and find him in here. Going to turn this off. Turn off this. Maybe need to find him. Octopus. Oh, I have him hidden. That's not helping me figure things out. Turn off both of those. I need to go back into our sculpting mode. You can see that we also have our upper body of the machine hidden. I can go ahead and use the grab brush. I just wanted to add some more asymmetry to him. Things are starting to intersect, so I like to fix that with the inflate brush. And the smooth, let's smooth and inflate. Smooth and inflate. I remember I had a professor in college and I was learning ZBrush, and he said, just inflate it and smooth it. It'll look great. And he was right. So, passing on the knowledge. Smooth and inflate fixes problems. It's great. Okay, I'm going to grab the grab brush again. And you know, this arm, it may just need more segments in here. And we talked about how to add in segments. We use the hotkey ML in edge mode. And if we hold shift, we can snap to increments in here. So that's looking better. I think it'd be fun if he was holding a seashell. I know I talked about that earlier and I kept going back and forth on whether or not if he should be holding a seashell. But we're getting really close to the end here, so I feel like I'm really going back into the details, giving this some greater thought and consideration. So we did 3D model a seashell at some point. And I need to remember where I put it. So I put some on this castle. So I need to look at my castle here. And we do have a seashell, so I'm going to copy this seashell and take it out. So I'm holding Control to copy it. We have a new seashell. You can see that we need to thicken this arm a little bit more because we aren't fully seeing it anymore. So I'll go back into my octopus here. And I'm going to try inflating him while I'm seeing the voxelized version. I'm going to now turn off the voxels just to see if this looks okay or if it looks weird. It looks like we do need some more loops in here. You just need more edges around curves for them to look smooth, and that's really what I've noticed myself. Smooth it out. See what it looks like voxelized. And I'm going to make this seashell giant. Just a giant oversized seashell. Where is the control for this seashell? Oh, there we go. Going to hit the T hotkey, make this nice and big. It almost reminds me of a fan. Like he's using the seashell as a fan to cool himself off on the hot beach. I may want to put the seashell in the same area as the star. Maybe that's okay. And we really need to voxelize everything else. I'm going to rename this Octopus Decorations. I also need to voxelize the sand. So I'm going to copy the voxel mesher, paste it, and I'm just going to delete the stuff in it and instead put in the text. First, I want to reset the transform for these. To kind of zero them out so that we get the voxels going one direction. It looks like I probably need to adjust the size here. To get back in some of the detail. And we'll probably need that amount of detail for some of the items down here. So I'm just looking at this. We have the flippers, we have the ramps, more flippers, a barrier. Going to group all of these together. Pinball machine details. I'm going to drop these in here. Oof. It looks like we're going to need to make these smaller. Now, doesn't it? Or thicken these ramps more, one or the other. The only downside to this is the smaller you make the cubes, the smaller you make the voxels, the more calculations that need to be done. So just to prevent some future trouble, I'm going to try increasing the thickness here. Now, in theory, we talked about how you can voxelize surfaces too. So we could give that a try, but I think I'll use the thickens. I'm going to try something. So I'm trying to problem solve this situation here. You could see that this hole is causing us some issues. That looks better. That looks much better. I may want to make this barrier a little bit taller. So we have that. We should have that in here under the symmetry. And we can increase the extrude to, let's say, 3. See what that looks like. I think that's better. Because then it drops down and goes there, and then you can hit it with the bumpers again. So after giving this further thought, I'm going to add in one really, really small detail. It's just the... Do I have it over here on my mood boards? So there's this part here with the kicker. Sometimes this is covered up with a plate, though. You'll see that on some machines. And I think since we're doing this very pixelated kind of style, it doesn't need to be super detailed. So I honestly think I can just drop in a couple of triangular forms in there, starting off with a cube. So here's my cube. Just want to bring this up to the general correct position. We can always mirror this like everything else to keep that symmetry going and working out well. I'm going to make this negative 6.5 degrees once again. Hit the C hotkey. I'm going to grab this edge and dissolve it using MN, and now we have a triangle. Oh, you know what? I actually want to... Is that the edge I want to dissolve? I'm going to look at my reference again. I want to dissolve the front one. So this one here, MN. And drop this within the symmetry. Now we got it on both sides. That just feels better to me. I like that. Okay. So I think at this point, we're actually ready to add some color to this and some pixel. I think we're actually ready to paint some voxels with this and make it colorful and beautiful. I did pick out some Pantone colors, so we're gonna jump into that very soon. If you found this helpful, please hit like. If you'd like to be notified when more episodes come out, please hit subscribe and ring the bell. I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations. I'll leave some links in the description that you might find helpful for while you're working on this and following along. Thank you so much for 3D modeling with me.